Hello and welcome everyone to this budget work session, the first for the operating budget. It is Monday, March 4th, 6:30 p.m. First order of business is the pledge to the flag. Please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And so I guess I'll just let you take it away, Rob.
Well, we are experiencing a little technical difficulty, but, well, there we go. Look at that. I think let's start then. We're actually going to start with a different PowerPoint, but this is fine. It's up, it's running. We'll start here. Every budget year is a hard budget year. There's no such thing as, easy municipal budgets. They're all difficult. They all pose their own unique challenges. And here in South Kingstown this year, like every other year, we have to make difficult choices. This year, I think that it's fair to say that one of the biggest things on everybody's mind is the trade-off that has to be made, the trade-offs that have to be made between school budget and what we call municipal budget. I've never really loved that distinction because in my mind, the purpose of any government is to achieve all of the things that the people have set out for it to achieve. And in municipal government, school is absolutely first and foremost among the things that citizens expect government to achieve. So I've never liked the distinction between school budget and municipal budget because, in my mind, it sets up an artificial divide. But we have to make trade-offs, and there really are decisions that have to be made that will, in one way or another, reduce the funding available for the activities that the school is engaged in, or reduce the activities that the police department is engaged in or the recreation department is engaged in. I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of weeks about somebody, I guess I was talking to one of the state reps, I think it was Teresa Tenzi, and she was lamenting the fact that folks at one of the state agencies weren't talking to each other. And I said, it's a shame, but there's never been a department of the whole. There's never been an agency that's responsible for taking care of everything from sort of a holistic perspective. And I've been thinking a lot about how to do holistic. How can we, as we're trying to work through these trade-offs, make sure that we're doing right by the residents of South Kingstown, by the kids of South Kingstown. It's the case that if we spend poorly, then there's no money available for the kids after school. If we spend poorly, there's no money available for the security and safety of the buses on the way to school. And we really have to, in my view, think about municipal spending not as their budget, not as the police budget, but how do these things connect? It's not an easy thing to do. It's not the way that we're used to thinking about municipal budgeting. I don't think that I succeed in getting us there this year, but I think it's an important thing for us to think about as we go forward. How do these things interrelate? Not how do they compete, but how do they complement one another? And I think that's an important theme for us to keep in mind as we go through this year's budget cycle. But more importantly, I think it's a really important thing for us to grapple with as we look forward, because I think we're at a tipping point. I think we're at a point where we're not going to get away for much longer doing things the way that we've done them. I don't think that we can sustain a municipal spending program designed the way it's designed and a municipal spending program or a school spending program and a municipal program that are designed the way that they are each designed. I think we have to rethink the way that we do the way we finance, the way we think about the programs themselves. There's been a lot of talk over the last year because of the facilities program about the size of the employment on both the school side and the municipal side. And there's been a lot of talk about whether or not we're making the right decisions about putting money towards salary and people, or whether we should put more of that money toward capital and land and things. Those are the questions that, you know, face us all the time. Those are the questions we have to deal with all of the time. But I think that we have to start coming to different answers as we go forward. I think that there is pretty solid evidence that we have efficiencies that we've not yet tapped. We have efficiencies that we're going to have to figure out. I just came from a school building committee meeting, and we received the news that the state has decided they're not going to entertain our application for a school improvement program in May. They're going to kick this off until September with a possible decision in November, which is one of the things that folks have been talking about wanting to see, to sort of build a very detailed and specific and, you know, accommodating program that would take all of the concerns and all of the ideas that have been expressed by the community and build around those and find the consensus a little better than they thought we had found the consensus with an application that could be submitted in February. I think that that is, in many ways, good news for the program. I think that we are likely to find a better consensus going forward on the school facilities program. And I think that we need a similar effort with regard to operations. I think we need to sit down, municipal agencies and the school agencies, and start looking toward unifying some services, sharing services where we can. We cannot do this year. We couldn't pull off that conversation this year with everything that was going on around the facilities. But I think that going forward, we're going to need to do that. We're going to need to look for places where the schools and municipal departments can stop doubling up, stop replicating services that are being provided one and then again the other. I think we're going to have to start looking for ways to see our work differently and see it as not quite as separate as we might otherwise have thought. I also think that one of the main things that we have to focus on going forward is the fact that our demographics are changing. I mean, it's been a major part of the discussion with regard to the schools for several years now. But our demographics, excuse me, are also changing with regard to our senior population. Really the only age group in South Kingstown that has been growing in the last 5 or 6 years is the group over 65. The only other group is college-age kids, but I think that's just an increase in URI enrollment. The over 65 are retirees. They're folks who are retiring in place, and they're folks who are choosing to move to South Kingstown to retire. Those are groups of people who have very different requirements. Teresa Murphy's group has seen a 15% increase in the folks who are joining and becoming members of the senior center. There's going to be an increasing demand for that type of service as we go forward. And we've got to start preparing for that. We've got to start designing our programs for that. So as the student population has declined and as the senior population has increased, we haven't quite gotten to the perfect new balance. And we're going to have to try to figure out a new balance. Some of that means that we're going to have to look to improve services like the paramedic service. We've seen increased demand for paramedic services over the last, I can't even remember the number of years, but quite a few years going back now. And we're going to have to put some energy and some attention there. Our budget, the budget that we're proposing tonight, does a lot of that. There is additional money built into the budget to pay for paramedics. As we had discussed earlier this year, last year now, we were having trouble recruiting because we just had not increased the salaries being paid to paramedics, and we were no longer competitive. And the community had the expectation of high quality, not merely medical technicians, but high quality, well-trained paramedics. Sticking to that and preserving that level of service means that we've got to pay for it. This budget builds additional salary money into that. And there's some offsets. There's some nice things that go on. When you have more people and you have a steadier workforce, you have less overtime. So it's not all out of pocket because you're increasing salary expenditures on one line item. But we've got to start focusing on those sorts of services. The Recreation Department is changing the offerings that it makes. We're starting to see more senior-oriented offerings. I think the number last year was 33,000 participants in activities that were offered by the Senior Center and the Rec Department. That's a lot of participants, 33,000. And we're going to have to continue to see that kind of shift in service because that's what the population is looking for. Those are the services that people are demanding. The good news is I think we're ready for all of these challenges. I don't think any of this is, hitting us by surprise. I don't think that any of this is catching anyone in South Kingstown off guard. The big projects, the things that we need to do that we haven't quite gotten a handle on, we've got a plan for. So, for example, I reached out to Rich Bourbonnais, the town engineer, the other day and asked him, how are we doing on road paving? Just where are we? Well, we're paving about 2.9 miles of road a year right now. That's not a lot of roadway. We got about 130, 135 miles of road in South Kingstown that the town is responsible for. 2.9 puts us on a very slow replacement path. He estimated that it would take us another 40 years to pave the roads that we wouldn't even get through them. I mean, the truth of the matter is pavements don't last 40 years. But part of the bond strategy that Trish has put together is to bond for some road improvements so we can accelerate that to some extent. We've got plans. We've got strategies in place for most of these things. Certainly Terry and the Rec Department have been on top of the demographic shift and have been moving us toward programs that are appropriate for our new residents who are moving in for retirement. We've got the financial stability, we've got the competence among staff, and we've got a population that is more than willing to share its ideas and its suggestions and its demands. So we've got the elements we need to be successful. The key to that, of course, is good planning, having a good sense of where you want to be and having a good strategy for getting there, and then a good budgetary plan on an annual basis and in a bigger sense, sort of where that fits in. It's not just, hey, the budget, we made it this year, let's try to get by to next year. It's thinking about each year's budget in relationship to the long-term objectives. We had a long conversation in this room not too long ago with the planning board talking about the land use goals and objectives that the town council wants to see us achieve. We really do need to go through that exercise. I'm not going to start that exercise tonight in great detail, but we do need to go through that exercise with regard to all of the goals and objectives. We need to make sure that what we're tying the numbers to in the budget that Tricia is going to present in a second, to those goals and those objectives, to the specific things that you'd like to see in the short run and the broader things that we want to see achieved in the long run. I was looking at the goals and objectives that we've got, and I think we've got 100 and some odd, 105 measurable objectives, and we have nearly 40 goals, and that's a big set. I don't think that we necessarily have enough focus on those goals and objectives, and I'd like to see us get a little tighter around those. Other than that, other than making sure that we're, doing what we say we want to achieve, that we're measuring and reporting to the council exactly how we're performing on each of those. And we do have some good news, and we will be reporting over the course of the next few days goals and objectives that we've achieved in the last year. Other than just saying we've done this, we succeeded, check, it's off the list, and actually, other than getting to more direct and routine reporting of those goals and objectives and thinking about them as milestones or stepping stones to the ultimate outcome that we're looking for, we're in good shape. South Kingstown has, again, got the financial wherewithal, has got the financial systems, has got the people, and has got the will to succeed. And I think, all told, while this is a tough budget season again, it's not one that's going to be insurmountable. It's not one that's going to be extraordinarily painful. In my budget message, I did ask folks to try to refrain from the instinct, and it's all of our instinct. When we perceive that there's a threat to something that we value, there's an instinct to come at it like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. This is the worst thing since sliced bread. I don't think that we're there. I mean, what's been proposed in this manager's budget is a 1% property tax transfer for the schools. That is substantially below the 2.5% request that the school committee has requested. But I don't think that this is crisis mode. I don't think that we're in a situation that we cannot manage. And in fact, I would suggest that managing it now, trying to figure out how to deal with 1% now and deal with the programmatic issues that we're going to have next year again and in the year after that, dealing with them now is better, smarter, more likely to be successful in the long run than simply cobbling together a short-term solution this year. We need to start getting toward those shared services. We need to start getting toward, but the incentive has to be there. In order to move there, we need to know that we're in a new reality. We need to know that we're not going to be able to just satisfy again. We're not going to be able to just cobble together a good enough solution. It really is time for us to begin grappling with the institutional, I've called them cracks, and I think that's inappropriate, the institutional cracks, the things that really do threaten us in the long run. I'll come back to some of that when I get to my slides later this evening. But the crisis is not immediate. The crisis is not today. The crisis is not a 1.5% less smaller property tax transfer. The crisis is what happens when the state gets through its funding reductions next year. We're in the 9th year of a 10-year formula funding. If we don't see the state formula for state aid changed radically in a way that improves our numbers, we're stuck with the numbers we've got. Not this year, but next year. And we've got to prepare for that structure. It's not going to be a situation where we can say, oh, well, we can cobble together one more year. That's it. It's permanent at that point. We're in a new environment, and we're going to have to deal with that. Again, I don't think there's anything there that's impossible for us. The danger is not tackling it. The danger is not resolving it when we have the chance. The danger is in saying we can cobble something together this year that gets the school committee close enough to 2.5 that we can pretend like next year is not going to happen. We cannot pretend the next year is not going to happen. It's going to be here, and it's going to be here pretty quick. Boy, that was more of a bummer than I meant to sound like. I'm sorry. With that, I do want to hand it over to Trish, and Trish will run us through the numbers, and then I'm going to come back and provide some more sort of, hopefully more upbeat context. Trish?
So tonight, we're just going to do, I'm just going to do an overview of the revenues, expenditures, and the departments from town council down to town hall in the general operating budget. Oh, I hate when it does that. First slide I have here is where do your taxes go? So based on every dollar for taxes, 73 cents is appropriated to the school department, 24 cents goes towards the general fund, 2 cents goes towards debt service, and 1 cent goes towards seniors services and the community recreation fund. Since 2007, we've been restricted by the tax levy cap, the 3050, which is we're required to raise 4%. That's actually the maximum amount of taxes that any town can raise, which is 4%. What that equates to on behalf of South Kingstown is $2,939,264. For 2020, for the proposed budget for 2020, we're proposing to raise taxes, the tax levy, to $2.4 million. This is $504,000 less than the maximum allowed. I have provided a chart here which depicts what the tax rate will be with the statistical revaluation and without it. So right now, because we have such preliminary numbers on the revaluation, I've calculated the tax rate based on where we are today, which is the reval as of 2015, plus the growth. So what we're seeing preliminarily is 0.83% in the growth from prior year. So not quite 1%. So that equates to a tax rate of $16.12. Currently, we're at $15.68. With the revaluation proposed number, it's estimated to increase about 12%. What that will do is, though the values will increase by 12%, your tax rate will decrease, but the same level of tax appropriation we need. The tax liability remains the same. So although the values go up, the rate goes down, people assume they'll be paying less taxes, but that's not the case. So with the revaluation, I'm estimating a tax rate of $14.31, which is a decrease of $1.37 from the current year. And just to note, we're in the third year of the motor vehicle phase-out program, which was enacted in 2017, that Article 11. All cities and towns are reimbursed for those lost revenues by the state. As I indicated, the 2020 budget is proposed using the values based on the December 31st, 2015 full statistical revaluation, which is being updated through December 31st, 2018. It's anticipated that the value of taxable property roll will increase by the 0.83%, which equates to $37 million of assessed values. Upon certification in June, the town I'm sorry, I had a long day. The town is currently conducting the state mandatory statistical property assessment update. The updated values will be used in calculating the tax rate for fiscal year 2020. So that's why I explained that using this, while proposing this budget, developing this budget, I use the current values plus the growth rate adjustment. I did not use the statistical values. So that's why you're going to see a rate increase to $16.12 versus $14. But come June, when the assessor certifies the roll and we adopt the budget, we'll be using those new values. So based on the preliminary values, we're calculating the 12% increase. The process of reassessment and statistical updates do not increase total tax revenue to the town, yet they serve to equalize the tax base. Therefore, it's important to note that while it's anticipated the tax roll will increase by 12%, the tax rate will decrease, but the liability remains the same, as I explained earlier. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm in the next. The tax rate impact on the average assessed residential unit as proposed is $16.13 at the max levy. That's the max tax. The proposed tax is $16.12. So in other words, if we went to the max levy, we can raise $2.9 million, and that'll give us a tax rate of $16.13. But we're not going to the levy. Right now, the levy is at 3.3%, which equates to $2,434,000 and a tax rate of $16.12. So this is how, I don't know if anybody's familiar with how we calculate the rate, but it's the amount of taxes that we need plus an overlay, which is an uncollectible. We use 98.7% uncollectible rate because we know that we're never going to receive all the taxes that we budget for. And then we add in a proration amount and an exemption amount, which is about $70,000. Then you come to your gross levy. From there, you subtract the amount of money that you're receiving because that's a frozen rate at $18.71. So you subtract the motor vehicle excise levy tax, and you come to your net tax levy. That net tax levy is the amount that is a non-fixed portion, and that's the amount of money that that you're looking to raise through tax appropriation. So you take that number, the $72 million, over the $4.5 billion, and you come to your tax rate of $16.12. So that's how the tax rate's calculated. I don't know, some people just like to see how do we get to that number. So it's the amount of taxes, the non-fixed portion of the levy divided by the taxable base.
So, Trish, I think it's important. In regards to the school, there's money built into that number, right, for debt service? Future?
Yes, there is. So the property tax need, if you remember when we built the capital budget, we had estimated an additional $500,000 going towards debt service for the future potential $76 million bonds. So there is $500,000 increase in the school portion of the debt service and that property tax need line. So that $55 million, $55,492, of that $55,492, $1 million is going towards debt service for their obligations.
Counselor, I think your question may have come because of my presentation of those numbers. That's correct. In my budget message, I indicated that there's a 1% property tax transfer being recommended to support operations, and essentially a 1%. It's not quite. It's just under 1%. Dedicated to the debt reserve or the debt service reserve that Trish has just described. So in total, the budget as presented, this proposed budget as presented, is just about 2% additional tax monies being made available to the school operations and facilities combined.
Again, just some information on the tax roll and the increases that we're seeing. We're actually seeing, and maybe Gene can speak to this when he's up for discussion on his budget. In particular, the tangible properties are estimated to decrease this year by $3 million. And that may be just because we haven't gotten everything in yet. Again, Gene can speak about that. This is preliminarily. These are the numbers that I used to build the budget for 2020. That's where we're at right now. And just a quick overview on revenues. So this is the state revenues. State aid to education for 2020 is $5,353,000, which is a decrease from the prior year of $800,000. That's the amount of money that the school receives in state aid to education. Other municipal aid, we're seeing an increase of $160,000. And basically, I just captured major increases, $20,000 increase in meal and beverage taxes, $30,000 in hotel taxes, and a slight decrease in state pilot program. Those are some of the contributing factors to the municipal state aid increase. And school construction aid, we're actually seeing a decrease of $26,000. That's basically for debt service that's falling off. Just overview on departmental fees, fines, and charges. We're projecting an increase of $60,000, which is basically made up of an increase of $10,000 from emergency medical billing services. In the prior year, it was $590,000, but I've increased that to $600,000. And again, that's kind of a revenue source that offsets their expenses. Recreation fees, we're seeing an increase of $48,000. Septic hauler fees of $3,900. Hauling fees, we're actually seeing a decrease. Those are the people that do businesses in town that need a license. And then there's other minor increases and decreases in the overall increase for departmental fines. Licenses, fees, and rents, we're projecting a decrease of $19,000. We're actually seeing an increase in rental property, and those are just our existing contracts with them. Most of them have a 2% inflation factor. Our cell tower antennas is 2.5. Some of the non-business licenses and fees, we're seeing a decrease of $27,000. Those include those types of fees of vitals, probate, recordings, dogs, and marriage licenses. And then also a decrease in real estate conveyance fees of $5,000. And I'm only giving you major increases and decreases. In miscellaneous revenues, this is where we're starting to see the impact of the town's investment policy that we adopted 2 years ago, where we retained investment managers so that we could get into the fixed income market. So we're seeing an uptick of about 0.9% annually in our town investments. Overall, the investment income is up $105,000. And I just noted that we have a duration on fixed income of 1 to 5 years, just in case anybody wanted to know how far out we go. Operating transfers in is an increase of $14,000, and that is made up of support services that we provide to the school department, enterprise funds, and special revenue funds. It also includes fair share fees that we take into the debt service fund, as well as open space money that we take into the debt service to offset those liabilities. And Oliver Watson has a fund that they left us, which is in a trust. So we are taking in $15,000 of that money to cover the senior services budget. And miscellaneous, $25,000 increase, which is the school department is proposing that they'll be receiving out-of-district tuition for 2020. What is driving the property tax increase? A 1% property tax increase to the schools, which equates to $538,000. Increase in transfers to the senior program, community recreation center. Together, those are $28,000. An increase of $500,000 to fund the future debt service obligations, which is what we talked about in anticipation of the $76 million bond referendum for November. The next chart is just a 5-year property tax levy. You'll see that's a 3.3%, an increase of $2.4 million in the request. Are there any questions with revenues? We'll just talk.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier 73% goes towards the school budget?
And that includes their debt service portion.
Okay.
Trish, I had a question about the on the school budget, the out-of-district revenues of $25,000. Is that what I think
It's
you said?
27, but it's off that particular category, which is miscellaneous categories, is offset by other.
So they're estimating students tuitioning into South Kingstown.
Yes, and they haven't had that in probably the last 3 or 4 years. They haven't had out-of-district tuitions. I think they're hoping for that new career and technical program, that initiative that will bring kids back in.
Thank you.
Can I ask one other quick question? I don't know if Rob maybe can answer it. In your budget message, you broke down the per thousand rate, and I think it was like $3.47 went to municipal. So when I did a quick calculation on that when I was reading it, I came out to 78, but that's, if we go with the new budget, we're at 78% of the schools, or is that?
To be honest with you, I'd have to rerun the calculation to know. But essentially, that is a way of looking at the same number. It's the same 73%. And if it's off by 5% on that calculation, that's my error. I'll run back and we'll go back through the calculation and make sure.
Okay.
Were you able to quantify the amount per household that the tax increase will be? Can you provide that to us?
It's an average.
I was actually looking for that slide, because that's actually a portion of the without reval and with reval. With the reval at 12% increase, it equates at $14.31. It equates to a tax bill of an additional $270 a year.
What is the number you're using? Is it an average or a median?
I'm using the 12% average. So currently, the average residential property is $353,000. The preliminary numbers for the statistical reval move that to $403,000 on the average homeowner. So that average homeowner is going from $353 to $403.
And I'm sorry, tell me the impact again, the dollar amount.
$270 approximately, for $270.
On the average.
Yes.
Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome.
There was just one number that didn't seem like it was adding up to me. You said 1611 is the effective tax rate that we,
1612, yep.
and 1612 is the max.
1613 is the max.
1613 is the max. 1612 is what
Where we're at right now.
But there's a gap of 400,000, basically. So that 1 cent is equal to $400,000.
Well, you have to take into consideration the uncollectible.
Okay.
I can't gotta get into my. I'm getting my files.
Don't need to hit, to
Well, how about if I get back to you when let me just go through my PowerPoint. I'm going to switch it back over to Rob, and then I'll take a look at that. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so going back to the expenditure side of the ledger, just some assumption and facts that are driving this budget. Departmental increases related to contractual obligations. So for non-union and NEA, there's a 2.75% increase in salaries. Council 94, EMS and police, 2.5%. The overall increase in the general fund for salaries and FICA is $787,000. This increase is made up by, for 2020, there's actually 2 extra work days. So for 2019, there's 260 days. 2020, there's 262 days. That equates to an extra $112,000 in revenue, in salaries. There's also some personnel adjustments. Rob can speak to them later. There's some just pay grade level adjustments, some reclassifications and pay grade adjustments for certain positions. Again, there's reclassifications and a new position. There is a new position proposed. That's the arborist position. And we also have a park maintenance technician position that was actually budgeted for 50% in 2019. We hired that person in January, so that position is coming on full-time as of July 1st, salary and benefits. So these are some of the drivers of the increase of $787,000. Another driver for that $787,000 is the fact that the 2019 budget, because we were in negotiations with the unions, when we built that budget, we built it with a 2% increase, which is lower than where we ended up being. So that's compounded, that extra 0.5% is actually compounded. Additional drivers is the retirement. The retirement in the general fund is up $343,000. Municipal retirement went from 11.77 up to 12.16%. IBPO went from 22% up to 27%. And EMS went from 4.97% to 6.84%. Health insurance increase is $71,000, and that's assuming a 6% increase. Dental insurance is actually a decrease in the premium. Overall expenditures for the general fund, we're seeing for all funds an increase of 1.6% in all funds that are supported with taxes. So for the general fund, we're seeing an increase of 6.1%. School fund, we're seeing a 1% increase. Senior services fund, we're seeing a 6.7% increase. Community rec fund is a 9% increase, and the debt service obligations is an 8% decrease. Again, this is the expenditure side of the budget, not the revenues supporting it. Expenditures by type. Specific to the general fund, salaries are 51% of the budget in the general fund. Benefits make up 25%, services 11%, commodities are 4%, and capital outlay is 7%. Areas of service, based on the total budget, general government is 5% of the budget, general services is 10%, public safety is 48% of the budget. Public works is 13% of the budget. Parks and recs is 7%. Library is 5%. And non-departmentals, which is our health insurance, our OPEB contributions, and our contributions to health services and outside agencies, that's 4.7% of the budget. And capital outlay is 6% of the budget. And the departmental proposed budget, which is the portion that we'll be speaking on behalf tonight individually, is the town council. That budget is down 15%, and that's it's actually because there was an error in the salaries, which actually worked out because we moved that $3,000 into supplies and purchase your laptops. So went from one line item to the other. Budget referendum is virtually level funded. Legal services is up 4%. Probate's level funded, managers up 1.2%, personnel's up 23%, clerk is up, the town clerk's up 5%, canvassing is down 20%, finance department is an increase of 2.5%, IT is 5.8%, tax assessors up 6%, planning, GIS, conservation commission is 4.5%, building zoning is 17%, and the town hall operations is up 12%. And we can talk about the drivers in each one of those areas of service. The town council's decrease, as I had indicated, was a formula error in your wages, which we ended up transferring to purchase your new laptops. Legal services is up 4%. The drivers in that is a 2% increase in the retainers, plus we added funding for labor, specific to a labor services of $5,000. We're seeing an uptick in grievances, and we also have the police contract that we will be starting in April, or the end of this month, April. Probate is being level funded. The town manager's office is seeing an increase of 6.7% in wage adjustments. And that is also offset by a decrease in benefits and commodities. The decrease in benefits was ICMA contributions that the manager doesn't no longer takes. Personnel increase is 23%. That is 7.5% increase in wage adjustments. So that's the additional, all these wage adjustments are additional days plus the steps that people are still earning. And she's also seeing, personnel is also seeing a 94, I know that looks odd, a 94% increase in benefits because there was a buyback in that department, and now they're getting family medical. Town clerk is up 5.5%. It's 4.3 in wage adjustments, 6.7 in benefits, and 36% in services. And in canvassing, we're seeing a 20% decrease. I think that's related to not budgeting for elections. Dale can speak to that maybe when the time comes. Finance department is up 2.5. It's 3.2% increase in wages, and as I had indicated earlier, the collections division, we had a retirement, and we had 3 full-time employees in collection division. We now have 2.5, so I've cut one of the full-time positions down to half a position. But we're going to monitor that closely because I want to make sure there's no impact on our collection rate. Finance is seeing an uptick in services of 6.9, and that's related to the tax bill printing. Information technology, very similar. It's a 5.8 increase, 4% in wages, 5.6% in benefits. Assessor's office is 6% increase. Of that, 5.8 is related to wages, 7% is related to benefits. Planning, GIS, we're seeing a 4.6% increase in planning and a 4.3% increase in GIS, both related to wages and benefits. That shouldn't say finance department. Who is that? Oh. That shouldn't be there. That's repeated. Building zoning inspections is a 17.9% increase in that department. Of that, there's an increase of 17% in wages. We had to hire some additional per diem staff to cover some of the inspections, the electrical, mechanical, and electrical inspections, licensed inspectors. So that's why we're seeing an uptick there. And the base for 2019 was significantly lower. And then for the town hall operations, we're seeing a 12% increase. That's related to 15% increases in wages and a 25% increase in benefits. And what that is mainly is just a reallocation of salaries and benefits of the building superintendent, because he's now managing the town hall building, and he was actually a portion of his salary and benefits were recognized in the police department. And we've decreased that funding in the police department and just recognized it where it should be in the town hall account. Other than that, that's the end of my slideshow.
Thank you.
Meanwhile,
Yep, I just did.
This is the schedule, and this is where we are on the schedule tonight. We will have 4 budget discussions this week, and then next week on Wednesday, we're scheduled to meet with the school committee in joint session. The schedule calls for preliminary adoption of the budget on the 18th of March, and then we go into April with a budget hearing scheduled for the 15th and then one for the 16th, and final adoption of the budget by the council is scheduled for the 29th of April. Going on beyond that, we will advertise the adoption of the budget, and our charter allows for the possibility of a budget referendum that would be in June. That would be June 4th. I'm sorry, Tuesday, June 4th, yes. And then the assessor sets the tax rate on the 15th, Saturday. Probably, I've been told it'll happen on Friday the 14th this year. I do want to point out that this is really just a portion of the extraordinary work that Trish and her folks do. This is the formation of the budget. We're right sort of at the beginning of the process, but once all of this gets done, and simultaneously with this being done each year, there is the actual administration of the budget, which is the oversight and the monitoring and the making sure that everything is done the way it ought to be, working with the auditors and working with the state agencies to make sure that everybody has the reports that are required. It's all one big integrated system. I've already gone over this in my previous presentation discussion without the benefit of the slideshow, but these are the numbers that I referred to earlier. You'll note that the only places we're seeing growth in terms of population are the college-age kids and, those over 65. It's our fastest growing group, and it's also the fastest growing customers of our services. Very quickly, this is just as of last year where we are with regard to median household sales prices. Not very different than the numbers we've seen before, but consistent. I did want to talk briefly about this. This is the list which appears in our budget, our proposed budget, of the top 10 taxpayers in town. And looking at this earlier in the week, it struck me that the ones that are highlighted there are residential property uses. They're not true commercial uses. They may be landlords, but they're not true commercial uses. Only half of our top 10 property taxpayers are true commercial uses, and that's an interesting characteristic of our tax rolls. We really are very, very residential dependent, and when we look even at our top 10 taxpayers, we're still very residentially dependent. That's not a very typical profile. Typically, you'll see that the top 10 taxpayers actually cover more than 3.72%. You're trying to be closer to 5, 6, 7. There's actually, Trish, on the top 10 taxpayers, I'm bothering you while you're looking. On the top 10 taxpayers, is there I remember there being a standard, an industry standard in the Moody's reference. Do you remember? I think they were looking for 10%.
Debt service tab. More than 10%.
Right. We're at a very small percentage being covered by those top 10 property owners. And that's interesting in itself. It means that we're very dependent on homeowners. And then if you look at even our top 10, we're even more dependent on residential uses. Now, it may be the case that the tenants in Harbor Village Apartments are not paying property taxes directly, but it's built into their rents. So even where we would look to see some dependency or some commercial strength offsetting property tax liability for individual property owners, we don't see it here. And that's an interesting characteristic of our property rules.
So, Rob, can I add one quick thing to that slide? That
3.4%. Top 10.
Yep.
The industry standard is 10.
That's right.
The interesting one that was on there that caught my eye is Jerry Brown Farm Association.
Yes.
What that really is 36 homeowners that divide 72 acres of land, and that's where that tax bill is coming from.
That's right.
And then they also pay individually on their dwelling.
Yes. It's, again, a very unusual profile. It's not the kind of tax profile you see in many places. I'm going to skip goals and objectives. We keep doing that, and we have to stop kicking this can down the road, but not right this moment. Just a quick overview. You've seen this slide again earlier this year. Just a general, very broad overview of where the state of Rhode Island thinks we're going to be economically. It is important for us to keep in mind that the folks making projections are looking to a pretty bright future still going out, certainly till 2020. It's interesting, we look at these forecasts and there were sort of dire predictions about where the mortgage rate was going to go this past year, and it didn't go there. This one is the state of Rhode Island telling us that we can expect relatively low inflation, and we can expect low unemployment, and we're going to see personal income grow at pretty good, healthy rates. Again, predictions or forecasts of this kind are what they are, but it's better to know that folks are thinking the future is bright and not gloomy. Very quickly, this is a summary of where we are with regard to state aid. Trish noted that we are up with regard to the pass-through state aid. This is really the fact that it's called state aid drives me a little crazy. It's a tax share that is a share of the taxes that are generated in South Kingstown that are returned to South Kingstown on meals and hotel rooms in South Kingstown. That bar, the green bar, has been going in a good direction for the last 8 years, and it will continue to grow. It will not grow is not projected to grow as much next year as it did last over the year previous to that, but it is projected to grow. Direct state aid, this is grants in aid to the municipality, are actually slated to decline again this year. It's not catastrophic declines, but they will decline again this year. On the school side, it is catastrophic, and it continues to be catastrophic. It has been for the last 9 years, and this bar chart tells that whole story. In 19, we're looking at $800,300 and some odd dollars being reduced from the state in aids to education, and that number is pretty brutal. That follows a $600,000 reduction last year, if I'm not mistaken, and that follows a reduction of about the same magnitude every year for the last 9. It's brutal. Briefly, I did mention the increase in calls for Emergency medical services, this graph simply shows the increasing demand for EMS services by age, and you can see the places where we're seeing the growth are in the older 60, 69, slight increase 70 to 79. We've actually seen a increase over last year, but a slight decrease over the last 3 years in those aged 80 to 89, and then a fairly significant, although the numbers are relatively small, increase from 90 to 99. Decreases everywhere else. We're seeing less EMS, although the 40 to 49 is sort of a mixed story. The overall story is, though, that EMS is more in demand, and we're going to have to figure out how to keep that paramedic service really the best in the state of Rhode Island at this point. It's not going to be easy for us. Craig Stanley has a whole long list of things that he'd like in the long run, including more staff to run 24/7, and the ability to run from a station in the southern part of South Kingstown, which currently they do not have. Those are expensive items, but if these trends continue, they may become warranted. I've done this hypothetical budget a couple of years now in a row. I think it's important for us just to remember the context within which all municipal budgeting is done. And that is, it's not just government numbers. These are also numbers that have to find their way into the incomes or into the household budgets. They have to be offset against the incomes in individual households. And what this, admittedly, this is very rough estimates of costs. This is not, I don't represent this as, the exact budget for anybody. But if you take a typical income, $72,100 is a median income in South Kingstown, and you look at the federal tax levied on that, you have to take $9,162 away. And if you take the Social Security taxes that are paid on that same income, you have to take $5,516 away. And if you then take the Rhode Island state income tax that's levied on that income, you have to take another $2,239 away. The same with the mortgages and home insurance and health insurance and utilities and the semi-discretionary items like cell phones and cable television and internet. And you get down to a pretty small number. You get down to a number that is, your $72,100 minus the expenses that we just ran down that list of $65,381, leaving only about $6,719 from which we can collect local taxes. It's tight, and it's not an absolutely imaginary household. That household does exist somewhere in South Kingstown, and the question becomes, does it exist in large numbers? One of the things that we can use to sort of answer that question is a distribution of home values in South Kingstown, and we know that if you split us into quartiles, we end up with about 25% of the homes in South Kingstown having a value of only $230,000. There are certainly million-dollar homes in South Kingstown, and there are 25% of our homes valued at more than $475,000 or roughly $475,000. But there's a large number of folks who are not all that affluent.
Excuse me, Rob, are you using tax assessment or something different?
This is tax assessment.
Okay.
That's correct. This is a tax assessment. This is not sales data. And so with that, I'm going to leave it at this. Budgeting's not just about the numbers. It's not just about making sure that you've got, everything lined up so that you can continue to do what you're doing. It's very much about doing the things that the community wants us to do. It's very much about identifying the right priorities. And we look to you to tell us what those priorities need to be. The budget that we've put together was aimed at achieving the goals and the objectives that have been identified by the council previous to tonight. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of moving pieces in the community, particularly around the choice between education and other. And we're going to need guidance on this. We're going to need for you guys to tell us what the community needs here. But we're committed to doing whatever it is that's necessary to get to the right balance. And by that I don't mean the right budget this year. I mean, whatever it is, we need to make sure that we've got a sustainable program this year and next year and the year after that. I am a firm believer in stopping and looking, I call them top-to-bottom reviews, looking at the whole system and saying, hey, we didn't see this problem because we didn't look for this problem. We didn't recognize that we had an opportunity to realize an efficiency because we didn't stop. I think it's time for us to stop. I think it's time for us to really roll up our sleeves, commit to the sort of task force review that was done with regard to the school facilities and see if we can come up with some efficiencies, some better ways to go forward, given that the environment is different. School population is not likely to go back up to where it has been historically. We're likely to see a continued decline. One of the things that was discussed at today's school building committee, we had the demographer who was the author of the most recent demographic study that suggested we might see some leveling out of school population. Even the demographer himself said, you may see a temporary flattening out, but you're not going to see a long-term, my model, he says, doesn't predict a long-term change in the demographics. We're in a new normal. It's a different environment than we've been in, and we need to step back and figure out how to, and I am very reluctant to use phrases like right-sizing or any of the trite phrases that get used around trying to figure out how to organize something complex like a municipality and a school district. But I think it's important for us to commit to actually getting the design right, and I'm not sure we've got it yet.
Is that it?
There you go.
1623 was the max. Okay. Figured that might have been it. All right. So that brings us to the end of the presentations tonight. Any questions from council members?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. Myself, Deb, and Rob were in that meeting with the demographer today, and I only bring it up because it's super important for forecasting how we move forward in the future. But one of the things that struck me was that he said something that I wrote down. It's in my car, but he said that in 10 years' time, he sees only potentially 25 more students than where we're at now. And that kind of just stuck with me when I heard that. Especially when this particular demographer is showing numbers that are, I think, more robust than some of us in the community feel that we're heading, in whatever direction that is. So I just think that's something important to keep in mind about where we're going to be in the future and using numbers that we have today to make sure that we plan appropriately for the future, just like some of the items that we saw up there were a 30% increase in over 60 or over 65. I think those are all important to keep in mind.
I'd just like to say quickly how important it is for us to have a control on the increases in taxes as we move forward. We look at that slide and we see 5 out of the 10 highest paying taxpayers are residential. We need to make serious effort to move that to make it more commercial. We talk about this budget, this proposed budget, and we see an approximate 3.3% increase in tax levy as compared to the prior year. and within that is a 1% increase in the property tax transfer to the schools. We don't even know where we are with that yet. We've asked them to come with a 1%. They've built a budget around a 2.5%. So to look at these increases in almost every single department, I think we really need to take an extra look and really get down to where we can make cuts, for lack of a better word, because the constant increase in taxes year after year is only going to disincentivize new business to come down to SK. And as a young person, a 26-year-old young professional living in SK, I think it's going to vastly disencourage young people to come down here, and I think it's going to only make our young people retention issue worse. I'd just like to make that comment. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may. I think that a lot of that is dead on. I think that we have to be concerned about attracting young people. I think we have to be concerned about the availability of land and the availability of business opportunity for businesses. It's a number that is often used around here. 1% of the land mass in South Kingstown is zoned commercial, just 1%. We don't have a lot of commercially zoned land. Commercial property is better tax property than residential property. Residential property comes with service demands, lots of service demands, whether they're kids looking to go into the schools or seniors looking for better programs at the senior center. Whether they're people, just people who need an ambulance because they've fallen down their steps. Commercial property doesn't bring the same demands. It obviously has, people fall down the steps in restaurants as well, but it doesn't have the same demands, and it generates economic prosperity, it generates activity. So I agree with the idea that we have to focus on figuring out how to do more in that area. And if we could take this holistic approach, if we were looking at our budgeting program as part of the total program, we'd say to ourselves, we need to figure out growth as part of the budget strategy. We need to figure out growth not because it's a land use policy, but because it's tied intricately to our budget, to our fiscal policy, to our plan as a body politic moving forward. We do have to think about it more globally than we've got land use and we've got budget. They are intertwined with each other, and we have to figure out how to do the one because it's going to benefit the schools and the senior center. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we are following the objectives that the council has set forward, not doing it in a way that is injurious to the community. We can't just have, and I've heard it a million times, another Bald Hill in South Kingstown. So we've got a lot of work to do to figure out how to bring the right kind of growth in the right way. But again, we've got the luxury of some time to do it. The school side's a little bit harder. The time is still there, but it's shorter in some ways. Their program is more urgently threatened. They are losing $800,000 this year. It's a problem. It's not going to be an easy thing for us to fix. I think that what I would say in conclusion on that is we're not going to fix it this year either. We're not going to, if we were to find the $800,000 and plug the hole that the state has left this year, it doesn't solve the problem. It just kicks the can down the road another year. We need to tackle this problem holistically, and we need everybody to come to the table and not just present their numbers for this year, but talk about their program in a meaningful way that allows us to figure out how to restructure it and ours so that we can do it better going forward.
Thank you. One quick thing I wanted to add, because we always talk about cuts, or the community talks about cuts. When it comes to property tax transfer, I think we need to also make sure that we keep in mind that if we were truly cutting, we would be doing a negative property tax transfer, not an increase in property tax transfer to any of the programs. This
proposed budget adds 534, 35. is $534 million, or $534,000 more in property tax transfer than was made available last year. Every cent that was made available last year plus $535,000.
And I think the key point to make there is that's the starting point next year.
Every year.
And, Mr. President, that also is important to keep in mind for where we are today, because last year, the school committee, initially, the superintendent had requested 2.3 as a property tax transfer. And last year, because there was progress being made, because there was great optimism about the path that the school committee was taking on facilities, and there was the expectation that there would be operational savings coming, the town council actually upped the operational side to 2.79. So that base is also built into this year as well. So if we had been at the 2.3, we wouldn't be necessarily at a 1%, we'd be at a 1 something.
Any other questions? All right, at this point, we'll open it up to public comment, other matters of interest and concern.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So why don't we have Jean come up first?
All I can say about the revaluation is we've sent out the notices. We are going through the revaluation hearings. We're averaging about 10 or 15 hearings a day. We're probably up around a couple hundred so far. There has not been any one central theme to the people coming in and inquiring. They're just more questions about how the process is done and asking questions about townwide averages, and but we haven't seen one central area where there's a problem yet. So we'll keep going through the hearings, and we'll see how it proceeds. We're probably in the middle of that right now. I don't know if there's any specific questions.
Tell me the time frame on the hearings. When do these conclude?
Time frame? People can book appointments up until Friday of this week. We'll extend that if there's a continuous demand for it. But the hearings themselves will be booked out for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Are people just in generally looking for a lower property tax valuation, or?
I think people are always surprised when their values go up, but we're right where the statewide average is. There are communities that went up significantly more than we did. There's a few communities in the real rural sections that were less than us, but we're right where the statewide average is. So people are, people come in when they see their assessment go up. They're not necessarily in tune with what's going on with the real estate market on a yearly basis, but
The last time this was done was 3 years ago, was that?
yeah, in 2015.
Right, so it's over a 3-year period.
Correct, and this is the first significant increase we've had really since
a downturn.
2009,
Yeah.
when we had the banking crisis.
My opinion is that we're back at where we were at like 2008. So it's taken us that long to get back to values.
Yes, exactly.
Gene, I go by here a lot on the weekend, and I notice you're only working one day on the weekend now?
Yeah, I try to keep it to Sundays. But I can do more, Joe.
Gene, can you tell us how the valuation is determined?
How the valuations are determined? It's done by sales. Everything is driven by the market. Sales townwide and by neighborhood are analyzed to gauge where property values are going. Obviously, there are certain neighborhoods that are have higher demand than other neighborhoods. Generally, south of Route 1, we receive a big out-of-state influence from Connecticut, Boston, and New York, people who want to be closer to the shore. Traditionally, those have been high-demand areas, and that's where our most significant property values are, south of Route 1. When you get north of Route 1, they tend to moderate. But the out-of-state market is certainly has been and always will be a significant influence. But it's by sales. You look at all the sales. We have a neighborhood of anywhere from 375 to 400 sales a year in the town of South Kingstown that are qualified sales, that are not family sales, and those are the ones that are analyzed.
How close is that value to true market? I guess it's the question in my mind right now.
Well, in theory, it's 100%, but you have to keep in mind that it's a mass appraisal. It's not an individual fee appraisal that's done on the property, so they're moderated. We're probably in the neighborhood of 92 to 95% of what true market value is. But we're revaluing the town at, I think a fee appraisal will probably be $350, $400, and we're doing a mass appraisal in the neighborhood of about $15 a parcel, which is the intent of mass appraisal, to try to make it affordable to revalue a town.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other department heads really itching to get up here and bear our scrutiny?
Good evening. Red light on?
Sort of have to speak right.
Here we go.
Closer.
Okay, sorry. As I was saying, we are fortunate enough to have the Champlin Foundation, which helps with a lot of our capital improvements. So salaries is really where we see the increase. I'd like you to keep in mind, with 3 very lovely old buildings, maintenance is a big concern, as well as space. So those are things that I could see in the future, as Rob mentions, when we talk about those goals and where the money, we might need to see it. That would be one of the things I would suggest.
So, Laurel, you said you had 3 buildings, but I think people sometimes forget maybe about, is it the Hale Library?
Hale, Kingston,
Right.
over on Upper College Road, and Peacedale.
And they're all old, actually. Yeah.
They are all old and lovely.
What's the average age? Do we know?
1891 for Peacedale, even earlier than that for Kingston. I don't have it.
1790.
Yeah, it was a state house. It's
Right.
really quite amazing.
The Hale
Very
House is
fortunate.
pretty old too, right?
It is, not as old as the other two. Don't quote me on that.
Are there any things that you struggle to want in your budget if money was no object, I guess?
Well, again, the space, we have parking issues at actually all three branches, but Peacedale, Kingston, and just making sure that we can maintain a building such as it is with the age and the traffic that it sees and the purpose that it is.
Would you say that your traffic is steady or growing or declining?
I think it's growing. I like to say that we're getting a lot of foot traffic. You see a lot of people just coming, especially at Peacedale, I see the most where people are coming just to work. They'll sit on a laptop. We have tutors that come in that will use, the various rooms to just do their tutoring, and we have just a lot of people coming. They'll come in just to read the newspaper, and of course check out materials. We have all our programming, so I think we're steadily seeing more foot traffic. Absolutely.
Are you seeing an increase in library card registrations? Or?
Yes, we average. I have that figure here, but I want to say we average probably 100 new cards a month.
Are you seeing an increase in e-book reading or
Yes, increase in ebook and unfortunately a small decrease in print, but not as much as some of the other libraries in the state. I think we have a really wide readership in South Kingston. People like to read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you want to come on up? Please.
Yeah, I forgot my laptop.
Good evening. As Trish mentioned earlier, most of the increases in IT are salary. There are 3 folks in the IT department. A number of my other increases come from hardware and software maintenance. So I cover the vision system that Gene uses in assessment. The IT budget also includes our town-wide and school as well, financial, payroll, HR system, the statewide view permit system that the town is part of that cooperative that falls under the IT budget. So a lot of those are set costs that tend to go up somewhere between 3 to 5% annually. So that's something that's a little beyond our control for those contracts. I don't know if there's anything in particular.
Are most of our programs or software in the cloud, or are they on the physical machines? And then I guess the last question as part of that is, from an IT perspective, I'm assuming one of your biggest expenses is probably maintenance agreements or software updates as you go along.
Yeah, so most of the software agreements that we have include updates, with the exception of Windows operating system. Those are things that we buy new computers. We phase those in about every 5 to 6 years, depending on the use and the purpose of the computer. So we do have to buy those, which is something we now budget in the non-major tech fund. So each department covers their individual costs and their operating, and then it gets transferred to a tech fund that we oversee to basically decide at what point computers need replacing and so forth. As far as cloud versus what we host on premise here, there's just a few that are in the cloud right now. A number of the larger packages we're considering. So for the financial system, payroll, HR, We're considering possibly migrating that to the cloud. Right now, it's been less expensive for the town to keep it here on site. The view permitting system, that is a statewide system for contractors, and we also use it for business licenses with Dale, is a cloud-based system, and that's something pretty much all cities and towns, I think there's 31 cities and towns use it currently.
Do we host our own mail service, I think, right?
We do currently, so that's something that was part of the pay-as-you-go program that we were looking. So in 2020, the system that we have, the operating system, the software licenses are basically end-of-lifed by Microsoft. So at that point, we'll entertain the idea to keep it in-house or potentially put it in the cloud, which would be part of an Office 365 deployment. So again, we'll kind of run the numbers to see where it makes most sense.
I mean, I guess just not numbers, but in terms of, does it make it easier to manage if it's in the cloud for, like, personnel, or is it better to have it?
Redundancy, it's better to have it in the cloud. So right now, we have an appliance on site that handles archiving. State law, we have to archive all the email correspondence from both internal as far as external servicing the public. We have to have that for FOIA and APRA requests. So it's not less management, it's just a different management. Some of the equipment that we have on premise, we'd be able to get rid of because it would go to the cloud, and as part of the cloud, they would be performing the archiving and the redundancy of it. Thank you. And I'll remind council if they'd like to let me know to pick up their new laptops. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Looks like we got planning and zoning / building left on this list.
Come on down.
I don't have much to tell you other than we are a staff-heavy department. Of our budget of approximately $581,000, 96% of that is salary and benefits. Our expenses outside of salary and benefits are only about $24,000. So it's mostly maintaining our computer software, our computers, putting reserve money away for plotter and scanner, advertising expenses for zoning amendments, and we have a small professional services budget. It's just sort of the general day-to-day stuff that the planning department does. Happy to answer any questions you might have about it, but it's pretty straightforward.
So Chelsea, I think a lot of us sometimes we don't realize how many people are in departments or...
Yeah, so we've got five. Myself, Kayla Gray, the principal planner, Jason Parker, who's our senior planner, Carol Baker is our GIS coordinator, and we have an administrative assistant who is retiring and will be replacing hopefully next month, the month after. There's 5 of us. Planning positions usually require a higher degree of education. The director's position requires a master's degree plus education and experience, and a minimum of a bachelor's degree for all of the staff except the planning associate. So we're generally on the higher end of the pay grades for the union employees because of those requirements.
Any questions for Chelsea?
Any challenges that you have right now?
I think our biggest challenge, and we've talked about this, I think, multiple times, or recently at least, is having the staff capacity to get things done in a timely manner that everyone expects. There are a lot of projects that are ongoing in the planning department and with the planning board at any one time, and it's often hard for us to keep up with everyone's expectations about when things should be delivered to the public, when they should be, projects should be wrapping up. I think if I could, make money materialize for our department, I would put it in like planning reserve fund so that we would have money available when we need consultant services. We're working on the comp plan now, as everyone knows. We'll have to re-adopt that in 10 years after it's adopted. And if we could even just start putting a little bit of money away every year into a reserve fund that we could use maybe for Old Tower Hill Road or for some other zoning amendment or maybe for the comp plan 10 years from now, I think that would be helpful.
How many, meetings per month do you think people in your department attend after hours?
Including yours, right, and all the meetings that I go to, we're looking at least 6 to 8 a month. We have 7 boards and committees that we staff, all of which have at least one meeting, typically, in a month. The HDC is maybe every other month, the Historic District Commission. And then I attend, all the town council meetings. So we've got a good number of those. Everyone, the senior planner and the principal planner, it's just the 3 of us who attend all those meetings. The GIS coordinator and the admin don't go to night meetings. But the senior planner and the principal planner get compensatory time for their time at meetings. So it ends up sometimes where we have a little bit of a shortage during the day if we're accruing a lot of comp time and people want to take it off. But we're at capacity. We're going, full steam ahead most of the time.
Do you see a solution for that challenge?
Not on the near horizon, no. We just, I think every board and committee wants their thing done, right? So we're working on, and we've put it now on, just recently added to all of our board committee agendas, an agenda item that is, let's discuss planning department work task priorities, right? So that all of the boards and committees know what all of the other ones are working on and what we are working on so that we can have a better idea and everyone can have a better idea of where our staff time is going and being allocated. It's not just time in the meeting, it's time for preparing for all the board and committee meetings, getting the agendas done, doing all of the minutes, getting them posted to the Secretary of State's website and on our website, and all of that follow-up. It's not just the 2 hours that are in the meeting, it's a whole lot of time in advance of the meeting and after, and then actually doing the work. So I think to start with, we just want to get better coordinated amongst all of the boards and committees, see if that'll help us at least have a little bit of a better understanding about where everyone is and what kind of time we have to devote to each committee.
And then you're telling us that your top 3 people then are taken out during the day for that comp time.
Mr. President, if I may, there may be a couple of things that we can do over the course of the next year. They may not be the ultimate solution to planning's personnel crunch. But one of the things that we've talked about doing is shifting some of those boards and commissions to other departments. So, for example, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, in my view, is very much about transportation safety. And I think it is an appropriate board to be staffed by, to be working with the Department of Public Services and the town engineer. Doesn't solve the problem, but it sort of moves some of the work away from folks who are otherwise occupied and may relieve some of the stress there. We do have the position that is opening because of a retirement, and there may be some opportunity to rearrange, restructure the work. It has been the habit here in South Kingstown, for some more than others, but to do meeting minutes almost as verbatim documents. That's not required by state law, and frankly, it's not helpful. So I'm not sure, especially since we record those meetings, and anybody who wants to hear the tape can hear the tape. So I think that we can change the way some of that work is being done as well. We've talked about this. Again, this is not a panacea, but I think we've got some strategies that may improve things.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how we can just make our internal processes more efficient and use digital means to track things, and just generally, every minute helps, right? So we've been talking a lot about that for months now, about how we can just, be more efficient at everything. And no, I don't think there's a quick solution, but I hope that every week we get a little bit better at it.
Yeah. I want to be clear, it's not the council's place to
No.
solve this, but
And
I trust internally that.
yeah, and the other part of this is that in addition to all of the projects that you regularly hear about from me at council meetings, my principal planner, Kayla, she is almost entirely doing project review, so subdivision and land development project review. So all of the other things, all the zoning work and all of the things with the other boards and commissions go mostly just through me and Jason. So, we're pretty strapped. And she's, Kayla is full on with reviewing subdivision and land development applications and keeping track of all of that and making sure the planning board runs the way they're supposed to. So, and follows the rules and meets all the requirements and all of that. So we're hopefully giving you a good bang for your buck. But
So is the crunch, the personnel crunch, because of an increase in projects? Like, where is it coming from?
honestly, I don't know. I've been the director for, it'll be 2 years next week. I feel like we've been this busy since I started. So I don't know that it's increased. I don't know, and maybe the planning board could sort of answer this better than I could, if there's just more zest for zoning change than there was in the past. I don't know. I've only been I've been the planning director for 2 years, and I've only been with the town for about 2.5 years. So prior to that, I couldn't tell you, but I feel like we've been going this strong for a while. Certainly when we did the annual report this year, and we did the sort of metrics at the end, we had 30 more meetings over the course of the year than we did the previous year. So that sort of signifies that things maybe are picking up, and there's more to discuss, and people want to talk about things longer. But yeah,
We've added commissions.
Yeah, you added the Sustainability Committee and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee since I've been the director. And now we're about to start the new Route 1 Stewardship Plan Development Committee to work on that project. We have project-related committees. We have the Noise Farm Task Force that works on the Noise Farm project. So we're trying to be generally as inclusive as possible, and sometimes that weighs down a process and makes it longer and harder. But we think it's for the better for everybody that way.
So sustainability is another one that could, in my view, fit elsewhere. It actually makes sense either at DPS, they have expertise in energy, or it fits perhaps with the building superintendent who is, as we've discussed, starting to build a division over at DPS. He's very knowledgeable of, and certainly could learn from folks who are knowledgeable of sustainability and building technologies related to energy savings. So there may be a place for that that board as well, or that advisory committee as well.
And we've talked to, Lori Fox and I have been talking for a while about trying to get planning board applications into the online view permit system. We think that'll not only increase collaboration amongst the departments, but hopefully give us a little bit of an efficiency gain. We're just trying to, do whatever we can to get minutes back in our day wherever we can grab them. Thank you.
I think that's all we've got here tonight.
All right.
Before I sort of surrender the downside here, I do want to just note, Trish did mention some pay grade adjustments that are contained in this proposed budget. I want to alert the council to where that comes from. You will remember that several months ago, well, more than that, 8-10 months ago, there was some discussion about whether or not the pay grade system for non-union employees was equitably designed. Amy Reiner, the director of Administrative Services, and I went through an exercise comparing the Federal Office of Personnel Management job classification criteria to the positions in South Kingstown that looked like they might not be classified appropriately, and have made adjustments based on an objective review of those positions' roles, responsibilities, required knowledge and skills, and the criteria set up by federal OPM. That did result in 4 reclassifications. They're not dramatic, but they were, from one grade to another. We tried to keep everything to the same dollar band to the full extent possible, but it did adjust 4 positions. And then the last thing I want to alert the council to is on Wednesday this week, we are going to hear from the outside agencies and the human service agencies. And the way that we've designed this proposed budget is different than the way the budget has been designed previously. In the past, the town manager made recommendations for funding outside agencies and human service agencies. This year, we have created essentially a pool, $110,000, and we are going to make recommendations based on applications, but we have not assigned dollar amounts to any of those agencies at this point. Through the discussion on Wednesday, the council will have the opportunity to allocate the funds that are available.
Rob, last year, how much did we allocate in total last year? Any idea?
224 is the number that sounds right. I think that's correct. 224.
We're looking at cutting that in half.
So
cutting it in half.
There are actually 4 expenditures that have been done in the past that have been rolled into sort of a permanent status, if you will. Those include the Rhode Island League of Cities. We get benefit from them. They're essentially the town's eyes and ears in Providence. It's not, they're essentially an adjunct to staff here in Town Hall. So we're not considering them an outside agency. We're just rolling them into the budget. So of the 224, I think the actual reduction at this point is $90,000. Okay. 70,000.
And then you said the process is going to be different. Is it going to be more like, are they going to be applying differently this time around?
No, the applications have all been submitted, and those will be made available to council tomorrow in all likelihood. You'll have those applications. We will make a recommendation. I'll make a recommendation to council as each of the speakers speaks, but the allocation is really completely blank. It's a blank slate at this point. We're not putting in. So I'll give you an example. We have an agency that'll be coming in asking for $15,000 to construct a facility that they think would be of benefit to the community. We will make a recommendation about whether or not we think that facility is useful, whether it is necessary, whether it's something that would in fact benefit the community. They will speak, make their case, and the council will have the opportunity, not necessarily Wednesday night, but during the budget process to make a decision about that. You do not have to make a decision Wednesday night.
Change the threshold, though, correct? I read the budget over the weekend, and you changed the threshold for those people that could apply?
Yes.
Part of the pool?
That's correct. And I'll go into this in more detail on Wednesday. But this really is a recognition that when you're talking about a small municipal budget, how you spend taxpayer dollars to support nonprofits is a tricky question. We have in the past provided some funding to community health centers. And community health centers right now are not hurting. The new Obamacare funding that's become available over the last few years has changed the environment dramatically. It is, in my view, kind of silly to provide taxpayer dollars to a program that's been growing greatly over the last several years because of the availability of federal funds. Similarly, when you're looking at agencies that have got budgets that are larger than the town budget, it's odd to ask for taxpayers to provide funding to these organizations. It is also sort of peculiar that when we take tax dollars in and give it to a nonprofit organization, the taxpayer, the donor, can't write it off on their taxes as a tax donation or as a charitable donation. If they give it directly, they can. So why we're in the middle there is also sort of a difficult question to answer. The answer that folks, when they justify these programs, usually come up with is innovative programs, providing public money to seed programs that may produce a good result for the community. That's a smart thing to do. So we've moved away from sustaining large programs that have grown so much that they can stand on their own to providing seed money to organizations that need it to see whether or not the program is going to be successful, and they can someday grow and stand on their own. So it's really a shift in the orientation from sustaining the same programs year after year after year, regardless of whether federal financing has evaporated the need for us to do that, toward looking for the innovators in the community who need a little help to start the innovation.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? I think, the big takeaway from the presentation, there's no real bells and whistles on this budget. It's, all the increases pretty much associated with salary increases or benefits. Do we anticipate some of those, like the restructuring of the non-union compensation, that's not going to be something that we have to deal with next year? Are others of these salary increases sort of out of step with what we normally experience? So
I guess there's a couple of ways to answer that. They are all these decisions always stick with us because they become the base. So in that sense, yes, this is something that we're building from. Tricia's point earlier about the negotiated contracts with the unions being above what was anticipated when the last budget was set, meaning that we not only had a 0.5% increase, we doubled that because we had anticipated 0.5% less. That base is going to be with us. We're with that. That's with us forever. In terms of whether we anticipate needing to make future grade adjustments because someone challenges the system of classification, I think we've addressed classification. I don't think that comes back and is a new issue next year. I think we've been thorough enough in that evaluation that we know the conclusion on it. In terms of union negotiations, I do think that we had a couple of peculiar circumstances that needed to be addressed. We literally were not able to recruit paramedics. We simply were not seeing applicants. When the market is speaking to you like that, you have to respond. We did. We upped the salaries, and we're now getting recruits. Those circumstances can arise. I think that we've reduced the likelihood that they will arise around the other unions that recently have had union contracts renegotiated. I don't think that we're on the low side anywhere in a way that should dramatically impact us in the future. I also don't think that looking forward to the contracts that we're contemplating negotiations on, that we're necessarily in the same place that we were with the paramedics.
Well, at this point then, we'll open it up to public comment. If there is any, please just step up to the podium, state your name for the record, and try to keep it to what we've seen and heard tonight.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Whaler, West Kingston. I guess I'm one of the quote-unquote lucky homeowners regarding the property appraisal. Living in West Kingston, where my home is located, even by West Kingston standards, it's a rural area of West Kingston. I don't have any town water, no town sewage, no garbage pickup, no town planning, no town plowing, pay fire district taxes like many people in this town do. I don't have any school-age children. But my property appraisal that I received has gone up 34%. And this is for a modest 1,200 square foot home living area on approximately 2.5 acres of land. When you look at the cumulative impact of this property reassessment, the yearly property tax increases that we can expect, and then the impact of retiring the debt if the $76 million bond is passed, South Kingstown, in my opinion, is rapidly becoming an unsustainable place to live for people such as myself. And I've come before this town council previously, and I talked about the impact of these tax increases have on homeowners, people on fixed income, including the elderly. And the town manager, as he pointed out tonight, people 65 and older are making a larger and larger proportion of this town. And I would suggest are going to become a greater and greater voting bloc. Renters, it was also discussed. Renters will be paying more taxes, more rental fees because landowners or property managers, when the rates, the rent go, their taxes go up, they're going to pass those increases on to the renters. Small business owners, again, our small business owners are going to be affected. That was also discussed. And also cost of goods sold and services. How are the small business owners going to recoup having to pay higher taxes? The coffee shop owner in West Kingston, who employs almost all Rhode Island's URI students, how are they going to pay for increased property taxes? Are they going to have to lay off people? Are they going to have to close down business, raise their prices? You can only do that only so much. What I'm asking the town council is that you consider these impacts. These impacts are real, and they're going to continue, particularly with this proposed $76 million bond. And I believe it's making my decision to leave this town easier because of what's happening with this budget. People are going to be affected by it, and sooner than later, when they open up their tax bills, there's going to be a sticker shock. And people will react to that accordingly. Thank you.
My name is Pamela Lesaeta. This is the first time that I come to a town council. I used to live in North Kingstown 3 years ago. Our property taxes were higher, and they're lower here. But I wanted to comment on about the library. The person who was speaking about the library, the children's section is really in need of renovation. It's pretty sad. Peacedale is in the basement for the children. I have children. And in the summer it smells like mold. I think it needs really renovation. If you go to other towns, the libraries are much nicer. North Kingstown, Exeter, you go north, or Westerly. And if you want to attract more families with children, to increase more studentship in the schools, maybe a way would be having nicer libraries, especially for the young section. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Gary Chapman. I just wanted to comment on the town manager's introduction about the senior services, and I know you're going to be talking about that at one of the future sessions. But I think he's absolutely right. I mean, we haven't really increased. I think when the senior center, the current one, was about 20 years old now, I think, and it's getting to the point where I think with the population that we need to think about that. We have some really great things in this town that we should be proud of. I mean, if you go and look at our recreational fields and the way we maintain them and the quantity that we have, no one in the state can compare with us. We have the best. But we haven't really looked at the senior facility and the programs, I don't think, in quite some time. And, I think the senior center closes now sometime late afternoon, I think. The only reason why I bring this up is I have a mom that's going to be 98 in June, and unfortunately she's not in South Kingstown anymore, but she's in a long-term care facility. But she went to the senior center almost every day, and it was the association with other people and the lunch, and I know as Warwick got bigger and bigger, they actually built two senior centers. And believe me, I'm not saying we should do anything Warwick does, but at the same time, they have a program where they offer meals at later times. Now, maybe seniors won't take advantage of that, but I know Peacedale Congregational Church does one night a week now. And maybe we could start the program by maybe doing 1 or 2 nights a week. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself because I know you're having that come up, but I just wanted to bring it up because maybe we could ask some of those questions when they come in, if we couldn't do something like that to start getting... Seniors, when they get older, they want to be with other people. When they leave the senior center program, when my mom left, she'd go home and be by herself for the whole night, and that's when things happen. Yeah? So, anyway, thanks.
All right. Well, did you want to say something, Rob?
Just one last thing. I just want to thank Trish and Amy Reiner and Colleen for their extraordinary work. This is an incredible document. It takes an awful lot of work, and the number of person hours that goes into it is something that we should not let go unnoticed and unappreciated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. All right. Well, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting tonight and reconvene tomorrow night. I'll see you all then. Time 8:38.